All right, what's up guys? So today I want to try changing up my engine bay detailing process a little bit. It's actually not the process, it's the products. So for years, which that sounds weird to say, but for years I've been using Meguiar's D101 all-purpose cleaner diluted 1:4 and the Meguiar's D170 hyperdressing, also diluted 1:4, in order to clean and dress the engine bay. And I really have no issues with the results. I always thought the results were great, especially the D170. I like how it kind of gave like a bit of a sheen, not quite glossy, but not quite matte finish, but just a little pop to all the plastic and rubber and everything like that. However, I don't love the fact that it's a little bit greasy. It kind of leaves something of a film over everything that you've dressed, and then of course the first time that you go out for a drive, it's almost like a magnet for any kind of outside dirt, dust, debris, and whatever gets pulled into your engine bay during a drive. So here's what we're going to try today. First up, Koch-Chemie Green Star. And by the way, I'm pretty sure it's actually Koch-Chemie at this point, but I've been saying Koch-Chemie for so long that we're just gonna stick with that. So Koch-Chemie Green Star, I've been using this a lot. You can use it for everything. It is an all-purpose cleaner. It's fantastic. I've mostly been using this in conjunction with Gentle Snow Foam in order to make active foam whenever I need a soap for a contact wash that's a little bit more than pH neutral on its own for a moderately maintenance wash, but less than a decon soap, right? So fantastic for that, amongst a lot of other things. And then the new to me product, which new to me, not the market, is Koch-Chemie Motorplast. So this was developed specifically for engine bays. And where I'm hoping the real difference with this product is that supposedly it does not leave any kind of a film over whatever it is that it dresses, which is the entire engine bay. So it shouldn't attract any kind of, it should almost work as like a repellent for dust and anything else that gets pulled into an engine bay. Now, the other thing about this that I kind of like is that you can apply this to a wet or a dry clean engine bay. Now, it's not like a silicone spray where you can you spray it onto the surface of the car and then hose it off. This you spray, it's the same process. You spray it onto the engine bay, drop the hood, and just let it do its thing. Self-leveling, self-drying, the whole bit. We'll see how that actually works, but allegedly, supposedly, that's how it works. So let's go give this stuff a shot. At the very least, I'm hoping that I can phase out the D101 because at this point, I'm pretty much only keeping that around for the engine bay. So streamlining those products a little bit and using Green Star for everything would be awesome. No reason that I can't, but I'm really excited to try the Motorplast, and hopefully that has the dust repellent properties. That is the thing that I can't stand about the hyperdressing. So let's go mix up some Green Star, give this stuff a whirl. All right, so here is our Green Star diluted 1:10. So we got about 910 milliliters of distilled water, distilled is important, and then 90 milliliters of product. So 4 from the top, 1:10, let's go. Remember when you were in grade school and used to have the cherry Luden cough drops on your desk that were essentially candy. You had to have these because you had a cold and you needed them for your sore throat and so on and so forth, but again, really you were just eating candy all day. This isn't that far away from that. All right, so it's been about an hour and a half, so I thought we'd check in and see how everything is doing. So first thing that stands out, you can see on the engine cover, there's still some spotting and stuff like that that hasn't completely dried yet. You can kind of see a little bit of a film on the carbon fiber, so we still have a little way to go. I'm kind of curious to see how this dries up, because you can see some kind of streaking a little bit here. So I do like the potential for how this is going to turn out, but we still got some drying to do. I would bet that I'm still going to need to wipe this down a little bit to totally level it out, which I'm not opposed to doing. Man, that black looks really nice. Like, this is like the only part of the car I feel like should actually be pretty glossy, right? So this black here, that looks really good when it's glossy. If this dries completely on its own, that would be amazing. So let's come back in a little bit, a couple more hours, and we'll see how it does. All right, guys, well, it is the next day, so time to talk results. Now, I have been told that I'm capable of talking a lot. However, if you are still here at this point in the video, you're here for the info and not some 15-second TikTok dopamine hit, so here we go. First up is the Green Star. Now, for this stuff, right, I mean, look, it's an all-purpose cleaner. It does a great job. It worked great in my engine bay, diluted 1 to 10. I will be switching away from the D101 to the Green Star for that purpose. It just kind of makes sense. I already use this, like I said, sometimes in conjunction with the Gentle Snow Foam if I need a little bit more cleaning power for doing a contact wash, or sometimes if the interior or an interior is really, really dirty. I'm not against a whole bunch of different products for a very specific use case. However, I also like efficiency. So if I can use one thing for when it makes sense to for multiple things, in this case, just an all-purpose cleaner, then I'm all for it. So Green Star it is. The only two things that I would point out about this is that one, as I mentioned, again, I did this in a 1 to 10 ratio for my engine bay, but also my engine bay really isn't that dirty. I maintain it pretty routinely. But if yours is super dirty, you might want to tamper with the ratio a little bit. So maybe like a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 7. Just a suggestion, I don't really know. But 1 to 10 is, I think, the sort of general recommendation, and that seemed to work fine for me. The other thing is that I should absolutely do this in a pump foamer next time. I'm sure some people might have, seen me spraying this through a spray bottle thinking like, you really should be using a pump foamer. I know. I have an IK foam pump foamer too, IK foam too. I really don't like it, so if you're using a pump foamer, comment below, let me know what you're using so I can check it out, but that little bit of sudsiness makes it a lot easier to apply. All right, next, Motorplast. Now, where do we start? Okay, a lot to say about this one. First up, okay, so I let it sit for a full 24 hours, right? There's no time that they assign to what a proper drying application is. It's just until it's dry, right? So, I mean, that could be 8 hours. At 4 hours, it definitely was not dry, but maybe 8, 12 hours. At 24 hours, it was dry, but with some caveats. So you could very much tell that there was a film on most surfaces. The painted body metal looked perfectly clean and it didn't look like there was any film on it at all. The most obvious was black plastic, right? So the black plastic had a very wet look. So too did I'm gonna say the carbon fiber probably was second. And that was like right there with the black aluminum in my engine bay. Now, I don't know, everybody's engine bay is gonna be a little bit different, but for me, that was where it was most obvious. And I would say that it kind of looked unfinished. I feel like even though it looked fantastic, by the way, but it looked unfinished. If you had sprayed it on, left it, did nothing else to it, and then raised the hood the next day for, say, a car show or something like that, I think it would look like, oh, they went to go spray something all over the engine bay, but forgot to wipe it down. That's just kind of the vibe I got from it. If you're a real fan of the wet look, you'll really love this stuff when it has dried. However, for me, some things I think needed to be wiped down and other things could have been left as it was. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. But overall, I think the way that the microplast dried was great. I don't think it left any obvious spots of, I didn't see any runs or anything like that, anything that looked like it had streaked or anything. The only one thing I would say, there was one spot on the back passenger side black plastic cowl piece. After I dropped the hood, I did spray around the car with some deionized water, only because the splash up from rinsing off the Green Star gets all over the windshield and everything, and I wasn't washing the car, but I didn't want that stuff to just dry on the paint. And I think a little bit of that might have gotten in to that side there, but that's it. Everywhere else, even the large engine cover, which is all plastic, was perfectly leveled by the time I opened up the hood the next day. And when I did check on it at the 1.5 hour and 4 hour mark, it was, you could definitely tell, like there were spots and everything like that, but it had completely dried by the next day. So no runs, no obvious pools of, liquid or anything like that. You can tell that it did leave a film on the surfaces. So, like I said, for the most part, if you like that wet look, you'll love this as is. But in my personal opinion, I feel like it just looked a little bit unfinished. It looked like it needed just a quick wipe down, just to fully level everything off. Okay, so next. Here's how I wanted to test, because I think I mentioned that I wanted to go for a drive and see whether or not it collected any dust or debris or anything like that, whether or not it acted like a magnet for that stuff, because I feel like the hyperdressing does. And this stuff claims that it sort of has a little bit of a repellent effect for, any kind of stuff that might get in your engine bay. So I wanted to test that out. So what I did was I wiped half the engine bay down and I left the other half just, with the little bit of film that was still on everything, with the exception of the engine cover. So because that was on the left side of the engine bay and I was wiping down everything on the right, I did a straight line down the middle of the engine cover just to see what that would look like after a drive, because it's just such a big piece of plastic. So I wiped half the engine bay down plus half of the engine cover and went for, it was about a 25-mile drive. I had to run some errands and it totaled out to be about 25 miles. So not quite like a, cross-country trip, but definitely more than just a lap around the neighborhood to say that I drove, with this stuff applied. So good 25 miles, use that as your frame of reference. I was insanely impressed with how little was attracted to the wiped down side of the engine bay with this stuff applied. It was almost like I'd never left. I saw nothing on the wiped down side. Didn't look like any dust or anything. And I drove through some areas where they were doing construction near a field. There was a lot of dust and stuff like that. I would say mostly on the unwiped down side, on the left-hand side, it looked pretty clean. Although if you looked, I think around where the black aluminum was that was still wet and unwiped down, that it looked like it might have picked up a little bit, but you would have really had to scrutinize that. If you just open the hood and look in there, you wouldn't have been able to tell. So in terms of its ability to repel outside stuff that might, creep into the engine bay, this stuff is fantastic. You could easily do a treatment on your engine bay, go drive to a car show somewhere, pop the hood, and minimal, like maybe you might want to touch up a little thing here or there, but probably not. Again, 25 miles, not a huge distance, but still enough to where you could accumulate some debris. So overall, man, I love this stuff. I'm 100% switching to the Motorplast away from the hyperdressing. A few other things that I think are worth noting. Whenever I come back, and if I remember to come back and wipe down the hyperdressing, there's, the film that it leaves on everything, there's a lot of resistance. So if you get a microfiber towel and start to wipe stuff down, especially on black plastic, a lot of resistance to get that towel going on the surface. You kind of have to fight through the layer of film that is left over, whereas this stuff didn't really happen. Like it was, you could tell like just a tiny little bit, and it just, buffed away really, really smoothly. So I love that about this. And again, even the stuff that was wet, if that's your preference, if you like that kind of glossier look, it really didn't look bad. If I had to do like an absolute minimalist approach, I would have just wiped down the black plastic and maybe the carbon fiber, and everything else I could have left as is. So, I mean, just insanely impressive results with this stuff. I know there's something that I'm forgetting to mention about this, and if I think about it during the editing process, I'll throw it in the description. So Always check the description because the forgotten thoughts tend to go there. That was the last thing. So the last thing I wanted to mention about this stuff is the finish, like impressions of the finish after it has been wiped down, because let's assume that most people, you're probably gonna spray this on, let it sit, let it dry, and then just wipe down some of the large surface areas a little bit. I think this clearly falls into the OEM Plus category, you know, for finish. It's not gonna look OEM. I don't think it looks like black plastic or, you know, carbon fiber right out, well, maybe carbon fiber, but not black plastic right out of the factory. It definitely has a little bit of a pop to it. Definitely you can tell that it's got a little something. It's been treated. It's not exactly just stamped out of the machine and installed. And I like that. I think that's what you want. It's not glossy. It's not obnoxiously shiny. It's not a mirror or anything. Certainly not. So the black aluminum looks unbelievably good. Like even wiped down, that looks a little wet. There was one black bar that kind of sits in the front, right underneath and towards the front of the carbon fiber brace in my engine bay. That has some spotting on it that I don't believe is from the product. I think that bit of metal just needs to be polished. However, everything else, it just looks insanely good with this stuff, and the black plastic, again, is more of that OEM Plus finish. The last thing I would point out is, in my case, with the polished charge pipes in the back, this stuff didn't really do that any favors. There was a little bit of spotting on it that wasn't that easy to buff out. Really, that stuff you want to use a metal polish on. I never really noticed anything spectacular when I used the hyper dressing, and this didn't really, you know, make any difference on that. I don't think it was all that great. But other than that, every surface this stuff touched, I thought was fantastic. And again, it seemed to do a pretty good job in repelling dust, which was like the #1 thing that I was sort of looking for, besides the non-greasiness of the hyper dressing in upgrading to the Motorplast. When you feel this stuff, by the way, the last thing I would point in terms of how this stuff feels, it doesn't feel greasy, but you can definitely tell there's a little bit of a film. And if you touch this stuff and then immediately touch your phone or something like that, there will be a smudge, but it doesn't feel greasy. It actually kind of feels like it dissipates fairly easily if you do happen to get some of it on your hand or something like that, but it's not greasy. So I don't know, for whatever that's worth, that's kind of what I got, my impressions of the Motorplast. All right, anyway, guys, so that is...
Hey, Mr. Presenter Man.
Huh?
Those little specks that happens to come up on rubber pieces that were on the hyper dressing. Is that a problem on this product?
Okay, no, my camera associate brings up a fantastic point. Sometimes when doing the hyper dressing, especially if you have a spray bottle that is not that good, meaning it doesn't aerosolize everything really good, and sometimes like a larger blot of liquid comes out than something aerosolized, you get a lot of spotting with the hyper dressing that you absolutely have to level out. I feel like the Motorplast dries much more evenly versus hyper dressing. You really can't let it just dry and then be on your way. That stuff you have to wipe down. I think that's the last noteworthy point on the Motorplast. Are we good? All right, guys, well, I think that is all I got on this one. So Motorplast and Green Star, fantastic products. These are my new go-tos for engine bay. So anyway, hope this information helped you, and check out the description below. I will leave everything linked, and let me know, comment below, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. And in the meantime, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
If you want me to come back, I'll come back.